You're listening to the Modern People Leader podcast. Today's episode will be a part of our People Leader series, where we go behind the scenes with today's top HR leaders and talk to them about how they've gotten to where they're at and what they really do every day.
Our guest today is Johanna Söderström, Chief People Officer at Tyson Foods.
So on this show, we've talked a lot about the employee journey. The first thing that comes to my mind are those key moments that matter that every employee experiences. So what was the hiring experience like? How did my onboarding go? How were my work anniversaries and key accomplishments celebrated?
Yeah, I think about my best work experiences, and one that comes to mind is my last experience, and they had all of this stuff mapped out to the T. At the time, I didn't know that, but in hindsight, they had their stuff figured out.
It's interesting. The old school approach would have been to look at the employee life cycle or the hired or fire process, but that is just outdated. And I think most HR people today would agree that the employee journey, it isn't linear. You've got to look at it more broadly. More of an employee journey map would be a more effective way to approach it.
I think you're right. But for the people leaders out there, they're like, what is an employee journey map? Like, how do I even go about creating it? What would you say to them?
First, I would say that's a great question. In the past, that would have been a major initiative, like an annual goal for the HR team. But our friends at Penn have created an employee journey designer tool and a ton of resources to support it that will allow you to do this in 5 simple steps.
Yeah, I mean, I've taken a look and I am super impressed with what they've built. It's customizable. You log in and there's a pre-built library of content that's waiting for you there so that you can easily start crafting your unique employee journey. And did we mention that it's free? I don't think I mentioned that, right?
Heck yeah, we love free.
Yeah, and as of now, it's not even officially launched. So only MPL listeners are getting early access to it. So if you want to try the employee journey designer, you have to follow these 2 simple steps. 1, grab your computer and go to pynhq.com/MPL. That's pynhq.com/MPL. From there, sign up with your work email and you're good to go. We are huge fans of Penn and we really believe in their product. So please go check it out right now. Johanna, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Thank you. I'm doing great. How are you?
We're good. We're good. A little bit tired, as we were telling you before we hit record. It was a very, very busy week at HR Tech, but we're excited to be talking to you today. We had Helen Russell on the show recently, and as you'll see, one question we ask every guest is who do we need to have on next? And I think the way that she described you was pragmatic, practical, no bullshit, incredibly humble. So we are very excited to have you here today. Helen was amazing. So I'm expecting that same level of quality, and we're really excited to be talking to you today.
Wonderful. Well, Helen is amazing, and she sets the bar very high. So I will try to follow. Thank you for having me.
And she gets us because we're no bullshit kind of guys. So this is a match made in heaven.
Perfect.
All right, so let's do good news stories. So we start every Modern People Leader episode the exact same way, and that's with good news stories. So we all share a personal or work-related story from the past week or two to kick things off. And we'll let you go first since you're the guest.
All right. Well, I'll start with the professional one. So I had a chance to sit through a business review yesterday with one of our partners on free education for all team members that we've implemented about 15 months ago. And the results are exactly where we needed them to be. So we see over a 50% higher retention for people who sign up for our free education. And of course, the ROI is right in there. So that was phenomenal to see that it's paying off. It's with a guild partner. And then the personal story, my son got into theater and acting about 2 years ago, which was total news for us. We had no idea who this person was. All of a sudden, he's standing on stage in his school play. And that was 2 years ago. And it all took off with tremendous speed. And he's actually being picked up by a casting agent. And they're signing him next.
What? That's huge news. How do you even go about finding a casting agent? You're like, I don't even know. He figured it out himself.
No, he attended an intensive Broadway intensive summer course camp this summer, and he had to perform a monologue in front of these casting agents. And I mean, they see thousands and thousands of kids, and they picked him. And so that
How
talk about
amazing. How old is your son?
he's turning 14 in 2 weeks.
Wow. So I have a 13-year-old and an 11-year-old. So I know the age and I know how quick things are changing in that segment of life. And that's tremendous. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, we're very proud. We're totally, flying here because we have no idea what this means, but we're very happy to have people around us who actually know what it means and can help us.
Awesome. You want me to go next, Stephen, or do you want to take it?
I'll take it. I have work and personal good news this week. I know what Daniel's good news is because we do everything asynchronously. So I'm going to tangentially, I'm not going to take his good news, but it is somewhat tangential. So we were at the HR Tech conference. Gee, I've been in HR since 2000, and so for a while. So this wasn't my first HR Tech conference. I think the last one I went to was 2021, and it was like the first post-COVID HR Tech conference. So it wasn't quite the same. Wow, this year it was back in full force, and I have to say my social bucket is full. I lean more on the extrovert scale than Daniel. And so I was really putting it out there. And it had been a while. And I just love networking. There's something throwback for me when I network in person. It just kind of takes me back to, to the good moments, a lot of good moments in my career. So that's my work good news. My personal good news is that I am going to ACL this weekend. So Austin City Limits Music Festival. This is weekend 2, and my daughters and I. This is the first time I will be going with my daughters above the age, so under 10 they can go in free. And so we actually bought tickets for all of us, and my daughters are really excited about seeing Mumford and Sons. And so yeah, that's my personal good news is we're gonna go see some music together as a family on Sunday.
I'm jealous. We're not going this year, but next year we'll be back. So let's see. My work good news story is HR Tech was a success. So for us, we had two main goals. Like one, connect with as many past guests as possible. And I think we connected with like 4 or 5 past guests, which was a lot of fun. And then goal number 2 was like, we got to drive business. Like we got to sell sponsorships. And there's nothing like selling in person. It just adds a different element. It really is different from having Zoom calls where you're just seeing each other through a screen. There's something about like, I won't say the company's name, but there's one company that we spent, I don't know, like 90 minutes at their booth. And the CMO was giving me life advice. We were talking about his kids. We met their CEO. And I just feel like that's the magic of being in person versus Zoom. So that's my work good news. On the personal side, so we have this like annual get together for all of my friends that we call J Day, and it's on Saturday, and it's just remembering one of our good friends, and we all go out to his family's land, and we have a fire, we have barbecue, we have live music, and my friend from New York's flying into town, my friend from LA is flying into town, so it's like the one time every year where everybody gets together. So I'm really excited for that.
Sounds really nice.
I'm excited. Yeah, I'm excited.
Family time is important.
Yeah. So I think that you have a really unique story. And not only are you a chief people officer, but you're also on the board of 2 companies. I know a lot of people leaders aspire to maybe be on the board of a company one day. So give us the Johanna story. Where did you start and how did that get you to where you are today?
I also hear a non-American accent, so I've been waiting for the journey story to hear like how you ended up at Tyson Food. I'm just so fascinated what the journey is. So,
well, I will share that it is quite a journey. I'm originally from Finland, from Helsinki. I grew up just outside of Helsinki on the countryside, and my grandparents were fishermen. So that's where my root comes from. Yes, we do eat a lot of fish still. it is part of my upbringing, but I think it's much more than that. It gave me values that I carry with me, and they have guided me through my whole life, no matter if it's personal or professional. And I think that's important, and I'll share later why. But those guiding principles for me, I'll share them with you as well. We talk about soul. Sisu is a Finnish word. Many people come across that. The word sisu means grit or resilience or whatever you want to associate it with. It's hard to directly translate, but that's what it means. In essence, it means you never give up, no matter what. You will always find a way. And then humility. So I'm glad that Helen picked up on that. it is important to me, because that's also what I seek out in other people. And I know we all know when it's there and when it's not there and what it means. So those are things that have guided me. And the other thing that's guided me a lot is sports. So I maybe 1/3 of my life, I won't give away my age, it's not that difficult to figure out later, but has been around sports. And I played handball, which is a very common sport in Europe, not maybe so much in the US, but Europe and Asia also. And of course, that's a team sport. And with that comes everything that you would do for a team. And I was the captain of my team, and we won 4 Finnish championships through the time that I played. And you dedicate a lot. I mean, there is true passion, sweat and tears, and finding yourself beaten, and how do you get up, and how do you lift yourself and the team up, and all of those things. I think there is a reason why we use sports analogy so much in business. It's very real for me. So anyway, those are the 2 angles that fit with my journey. My journey started back in Finland with a company called Ericsson, and many of you might still remember the company that used to make phones, even those old-fashioned ones that you actually have to figure out how to use if you haven't seen them before. But the mobile phone Ericsson, and that was in a time when Nokia, as a Finnish company, was of course very strong. So you can imagine working for a Swedish company in Finland, where the whole Finnish national pride was about Nokia at that point in time. So it's almost like you seek out trouble, is what I hear. But you know what? It's kind of fun to always be the underdog, and that means you have to do more and figure out ways to navigate and all of that. And so that was fascinating. I got to do a lot of finance, supply chain, and I also had specific roles within marketing. I thought that was going to be my thing. I really did think that marketing was my thing. But here we are. I'm working with some customer events, and someone said, I'd like you to work on this project. It has to do with people, and it's in the personnel administration department. It sounded extremely boring, and I said no. And 30 years later, here we are, me working for the people function for a big company and leading that. But there's a lot of learning that goes into that, and it's the reason I spend a little time talking about it, because it did shape me and continues to shape me. And this was an epiphany that I had, because I didn't want to do it, and someone still convinced me that you have a way about you that's non-confrontational. You get people to the table, you get people to talk, you get people to put things on the table, and you actually figure out ways for the different parties to listen. And could you please just come and try to work on this specific people topic project for us? And I still didn't want to do it. I wanted to work with the customer. I wanted to be out there, not in here. And I said, okay, fine, I'll figure it out. And I had this epiphany that led me to working and loving working with people. And that was that I'm just going to take whatever little I know about the customer interface and how you position and market and turn that internally. And mind you, this is almost 30, it's over 30 years ago. There was nothing about employee experience that existed back then. But if you think about it, think about customer experience, all that we know about that, and how you think about the moments that matter and how you treat your customers. I took the little I knew about that and put it against what I needed to work with the internal employee base on. And it somehow just clicked. And from there on, that's my approach. And it's always the outside in, like, what would the customers do? Would the customers want to buy this product or try this, or would they be loyal? It's actually, in essence, exactly the same with the employees. So Ericsson became Dow Chemical. I moved to Germany. I didn't speak German. I was the youngest, the only female, and the only foreigner. That's pretty much, again, looking for trouble, if you like, working with unions and works councils and all of that. And however, I learned the language very quickly. There was no other way. I figured out ways to get people to the table, get people to talk, and navigate through what at that point in time was revolutionary in Germany, which was about how do you use internet to recruit? Again, it's not that long ago, but it was a way to get technology in front of everyone, because in Germany, you might know, you actually used to have very thick resumes, and it mattered the type of paper, the color of the paper, the binder that the paper was in. Your resume had to be like an artwork to be considered.
I remember that.
Do you remember that? To get to be considered by the hiring manager, the hiring panel, and all of that to show and share that there is another way. We can actually get to something different. And I was part of a global project at the time doing workforce planning for Dow Chemical in Germany that looked at how to use internet for recruiting. And I mind you, I come from Finland, where Ericsson and Nokia had already done this for quite some time. And all the negativity and the resistance and the no, we can't do this. People don't have internet, and we need the resumes to be on this kind of paper. And, all the things that you were expecting to hear were absolutely there, and then some. So how to get people to actually embrace that? Maybe, just maybe, we open the door a little bit and we see what happens. Because yes, people do have internet. And if they don't, they go to an internet cafe. That's how it works. And I remember this was the breakthrough with the local works councils, because it was very clear that I was told that works councils will never allow you to do anything like that. It has to be done a certain way. So with my little knowledge of German, I went to talk to the works councils and explain to them that maybe they would like to try it out and partner with me, and I'll help them. I'll sit next to them and teach them and show them how it's done. And even the global project team told me that, yeah, we can do everything, but not in Germany, because that's not going to work. And fast forward, Germany was the first country to adopt and implement the way to recruit via internet.
Wow.
So it was just against all odds, and there it was, and it worked, and then it spread from there. So anyway, I moved to Switzerland, had the opportunity to work with some phenomenal people across all of Middle East, Europe, of course, India, Africa. I got into areas that I had only dreamt of being a part of, and helping develop their people practices and their compensation strategies. And it helped that I had studied both marketing and economics. I never studied anything in human resources. It wasn't a field of study back in Finland then at that time. Now it is. But it helped because that had, I think, the way of opening doors, and it allowed me to have a seat at the table, if you use that term a little loosely, because I could speak through financial terms and business terminology, and I could talk about the economics, the macroeconomics, all of those that you wouldn't necessarily directly immediately expect from an HR person. And we were equals at the table. And then all of a sudden, there were opportunities that weren't there before to have conversations.
You've literally hit on like 10 things that we've been talking about of the modern people leader over the past couple of months. But before we talk about any of that, you sort of just breezed by the fact that you won 4 Finnish championships. So were you a professional athlete, or was that like when you were in school? Like, tell us the story behind that.
Yeah, so the funny thing was that it wasn't professional. We didn't get paid, but it was a passion. So it was between finishing my studies, and actually I was working at the same time. The those were fun times. Very, very time consuming. I remember my fondest memory of that was when the women's team that I was on, we actually got the male coach to coach us because we didn't have a women's coach, and he had like zero mercy. Like it didn't matter to him. The gender had zero impact on what he had us do, running up and down and at a downhill ski slope, up and down, up and down was one training. Anyway, I mean, we probably because of him that led us to some of those victories and the championship titles, just because.
I actually relate to your journey so much, but not for the normal reasons. So you glazed over a couple of the brands that you mentioned, and but they are like, I know them very, very well. My stepfather rather, he worked for Ericsson for like 8 years, took an expat assignment to Mexico with Ericsson, and so I graduated in 2000 and from university, and I started my career in global mobility and the global mobility part of HR. So expats. And as the new guy, I worked on all the no-name customers that no one had ever heard about, and my travel was to very weird places like Indiana and Troy, Michigan. But then I got my first big account. So I'm a senior account person, and I was assigned to Nokia. So, and I've been to Finland twice through that, and I actually got to know the Finnish culture well. So it was like hearing your story took me back to like my middle school days, all the way up to my early 20s. I actually went to a Finnish wedding. Yeah, I know very, very well.
That's funny. Yeah, there are different stories to be told, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
So Johanna, I think that most people have heard of Tyson. I think it's safe to say that. But I guess tell us a little bit about the company that most people wouldn't know about Tyson.
Yeah, so what probably many people know is the brands that Tyson has. We have, of course, the Tyson brand, but we also have brands like Jimmy Dean or Hillshire Farm or Ballpark or Wright, State Fair. You see a lot of those brands out there, and you don't always know it's Tyson. The other thing I would share is that we are based in Northwest Arkansas, in the middle of US, and it's called a flyover state, which is to show where I started. I actually had to look it up when the company approached me to see where it is. And it was funny because you sort of know, but you don't really know. And then when you start to do some digging, I mean, this is a beautiful state. Well, just gorgeous nature with lakes and Ozark, some know that from another Netflix series maybe, but a
Oh
beautiful
yeah.
place. And the other thing that maybe is not known is that we do have 140,000 team members. We're a big company. And the nice thing about that is, this is where my passion is that we get to work with over 90,000 team members that are actually in the front line. They're working in the plants, and they come from all walks of life. This is a big country, and I would say we have it all. Whether it's refugees, immigrants, fourth generation Tyson team members, I would claim that we're probably the most diverse company in this country. And that is a story we need to figure out a better way to tell and share, because in itself it's contagious. It brings a wonderful diverse culture and people that come together to work here. That's probably something that isn't that well known.
And so you mentioned 140,000 team members. And is that all over the US, all over the world?
So we have about 120,000 in the US,
Okay.
and then about 20,000 in the rest of the world. Around Europe and Asia is where we're centered. Malaysia, Thailand, China.
Okay. Gotcha. And why should we be jealous that you get to work at Tyson?
Well, I would say if you like protein, this is the place to be.
I
We
love
definitely like
protein.
protein.
I mean, also in the US, we probably have close to 20% of the beef, pork, and chicken market in the US. So from that sense as well, many people do come across our product every day. But I think the other part is that what I touched upon earlier, the sheer fact of the diversity of the workforce, you don't have to travel the world. The world is pretty much here across our plants. And the other thing is that many companies have missions that are resonating with some and not with others. I feel that Tyson has one of the really noble missions. I mean, we're here to feed the world. You can't necessarily compete with that, I think. And it's about how we bring affordable and sustainable food to tables across the world. Because if you think about it, how people come together around food, families come together around food, and stories and lives and everything is shared around food. That's also how you can change the world, if you think about it, like one meal at a time. It's pretty impactful.
It's amazing. I'm still stunned by the sheer number of team members you have, and so in preparation, in fact, right before we hit record, I was commenting how I was looking through your LinkedIn profile, and I always go to the company's profile just to see what news is happening, what's going on, and I saw 33 to 34,000 employees listed on LinkedIn. So these are people that have put Tyson as their employer on LinkedIn. So I was like, oh yeah, maybe it's 50 or 60 or 70, but 140,000 team members. I think, Daniel, I may be wrong, but I think this Tyson may be the largest employer that we've had on this show. Is that?
I think so. I think maybe second place would be Kraft Heinz.
Yeah. And so, and I think you've got them beat by headcount terms by like 2 or 3x at least. And so I want to go back to something that you said, and I'm using my words, not yours, but it feels like Tyson, like alone, just within your workforce, has all the various diverse components that we talk about in the modern workforce, but all in one company, in a single workforce. And so that has to be challenging. And I'm just curious, as you set your HR strategy, how does one zoom out and think about the scalability of programs or the personalization of programs? How do you apply that kind of thinking to an end user or an end consumer of your product, which is the employee experience, that is so diverse? Like how do you do that? Like when you started in your job, were you deliberate in making sure that you understood the different types of employees and team members you have at Tyson?
Yeah, so I've had the opportunity to work in a chief HR officer role before I came to Tyson, and that allowed me to truly figure out what team member experience, employee experience mean. And it can mean everything and anything and everything to different people. But if you think about what those true value drivers are for the company, like what is the strategy and how do you operationalize it and what is the culture around it, that's pretty much your 3 pillars. And put the employee experience that you want to achieve against that. Call it the moment that matter, moments that matter, whatever you want to call it. That doesn't necessarily matter. What matters is how you think about that experience being actually delivered. The strategies aligned to it, how you operationalize it, and the culture that you want to achieve. That was for me probably the starting point here at Tyson as well. And I had to really truly understand, let me call them the different cohorts that work at Tyson, and what that means, because you can talk about trying to get to one employee experience. I don't think that's doable in any setting, no matter how or what your company profile is. But specifically here, what I mentioned, we do have, of course, corporate employees and leadership in the plant, but then we have the frontline team members who often come to us without experience, without education, And we then help them through the onboarding and the learning and the development and skill growing process so that they can perform the roles that we have, whether it is cutting meat on a line or whether it's packing or shipping or driving, whatever it might be, because food logistics and food supply chain is extremely complicated. And the people around that are true exceptional heroes to me. So to fully understand that, I went through plans, I went through roles, I stood behind people when they did their roles, performed their jobs. I also joined in the midst of COVID. And if you experienced food shortage at that point in time, some of that were because we didn't run the plants at full speed or capacity because we had to quarantine people, as many of you know. And that in itself led me to better understand how we create experiences that truly matter to the frontline team members. And it started with understanding what they value, what they think about, what they need, what they have, what the engagement drivers are. And I will share with you that we did not have an engagement survey at that time. It did not exist. So that was one of my first go-to. My starting points was to create an engagement survey for the company. And this is in its 76-year history that hadn't been done. And I remember that was my first aha. and understanding that it can be done, because I probably worked engagement surveys in the mid 80s in Ericsson. So now I gave it away. But I was met with, we can't do engagement surveys because we can't do paper and pen in the plants. And like, wait a minute, this is the 21st century. I'm not talking paper and pen. I'm talking technology, right? And I was also then met with, well, our people don't necessarily know how to use technology. So I said, but they all have a phone, right? And that's where it started. It was like, no, we don't think they do. Okay, so let's go to the only source that don't lie, which is data. Let's figure out what the data tells us. Well, we surveyed the team members, 93.7% have a phone, which means we can do QR codes. I said, but they don't know how to use QR codes. I said, come on, we're in the midst of COVID. Everyone knows how to check them.
What an amazing comeback the QR code had during COVID.
Right?
It's got to be one of the greatest success stories.
And again, fast forward, we put up QR codes in our plants, and we explain to the people through interpreter programs, chaplain programs, HR, occupational health, leaders, HR, everyone, that if you snap this, you can choose the language, and then we'll ask you to reply to a survey. 55,000 people participated.
Wow.
Not anything else than just that the first time around. So that was, for us, that was breakthrough. It showed that yes, technology, yes, phones, yes, data, and yes, engagement data. And so from there, long story, but from there we started to build what the true opportunities are, the focus areas. As you do with data, you start to look for correlations and patterns. And now we're the third year in doing that, and 107,000 people participated. So it works. But
so for the companies out there that are non-technology, non-corporate, it can be done. In my former life, I was the CEO of an engagement survey company, and I can't tell you how many objections we heard, like, oh,
all the time.
All the time. It can't be done. We don't know. They don't know how to use the phone, or yeah, we used to cart a computer around to everyone, and we can't do. It can be done because we know Tyson did it.
It can be done. And the nice thing is that our engagement is really high, 77%, which is, when you see what's happening around the world, I'm sure you see all the data about how engagement is dropping and it's the lowest it's been. And no, we're doing some things right. And a few of them are directly linked to the team members are humans. They're not numbers or machines. They're humans. So if we think about things that we put in place, back to your question, Daniel, about how we know what the true needs are and the employee experience is divided up by cohort, we have, for the first time in the industry, paid parental leave, for example, free education through all team members. We pay for it, whether it's a certificate that you need something for the role to grow in your career, all the way up to master's degrees. So that's the way to show and share that we want you to have a long and fulfilling career here, and we're here to help you. Immigration programs. We have over 7,000 people that we're helping through immigration programs, even getting their citizenships. I piloted a digital version thereof, so I got my own citizenship through a pilot that we put in place through the digital tools. And it's not that easy, but at least now I have the experience to see what our frontline team members go through. Much better way to ensure that we're there to support and help them.
Well, I love everything that you just shared with us. I'm in the midst of reading a book called Built for People, and it's written by a multi-time guest on our show, Jessica Zvon, and her big thing is people operations as a product, and that you have three product. Every company has three products: the product that the actual widgets that are being sold, the vision that has been sold to shareholders that you're executing against, and the third product is your employee experience. And just like any actual product, you should have an iterative approach to managing and changing and enhancing the employee experience, but it relies on a completely different mentality. It requires the same core skill sets that HR or the people function should have, but it also requires a new mindset that you have to overlay on top of all the core skills. And one of the new ways of thinking is a testing mentality. And so what I love about even the citizenship is you literally tested it yourself. And so you could see, what is this experience going to be like? Is it painful? Is it easy? How can we improve it? And it just fits. And as Daniel knows, I'm obsessed with this book. I'm only 4 chapters in. So full disclosure, I haven't read all of it yet, but it's been a great read. And everything you're describing falls into this really modern way of looking at the people function. And so I'm curious, I'm guessing your approach may be different to your predecessor. Was there intentionality when you were selected as the new CHRO? Was that something the company was looking for? Like, how does that shift happen at a company like Tyson that I think could be viewed as a more traditional company with possibly more traditional HR practices? But here, like I'm speaking to you, and you're in a boardroom, a wood boardroom type of office with modern art behind you, and you're wearing this slick red leather jacket, and so I feel like that's part of the persona, but that's part of what must have attracted you to, or attracted Tyson to hiring you. Is there truth behind that?
I think there is. So I am extremely driven by creating and building and transforming. That's like my, I don't know what to call it. It's almost like my brand. It's what I do, and it comes pretty naturally to me. And yes, I am probably met by every single not possible, can't do it, won't work that you can imagine, and then some. And what people don't know until they figure it out is that actually just engages me more. Because as I said, CISO is a driver. You will always find a way. You will never give up. There's always a way, even if it means that you every day have to run your head into the wall and again and again. But what happens is every day you chip away just a little bit more of the wall, and eventually you'll go through. And I'm very eyes wide open aware that coming to Tyson was not going to be just an easy, let's take a playbook from the shelf and figure it out and do it. rightfully, as you mentioned, Tyson was a more analog company and more traditional than you would have wanted it to be. And that's, I think, one of the reasons why I was picked, and I picked Tyson, vice versa, because I knew that there was a creation and a build and a transformation, and that was the mandate when I came. And I would say, to ask a company like Tyson to start changing its whole operations and practices and strategies from within the people function, digitalizing the people function, I don't think that was necessarily in the cards, but that's what happened. And now, since we have started it and the momentum is there, you see more and more and more. You see smart factories, you see things coming that maybe was absolutely not in the cards a few years ago, but it is now, because we've started to show and share that actually data, digitalization, technology will make our lives easier, will help us get to places quicker than we ever had before. And our people, just because they work on the front line, are not at all ignorant to the technology, not at all. And often, unfortunately, we associate the job which you do with maybe the intellectual capacity that you have. And that is just the biggest mistake we can do in our roles, the biggest mistake. Give them the tools, hold hands, show it how it's done, and you will be very, very surprised.
Yeah, it's like, who are we to assume what others are capable or not capable of doing or taking on? Yeah, I love that.
So I feel like we can kind of get stuck in this echo chamber almost on the modern people leader, because we're talking to a lot of HR leaders that work in tech, and it's, I'm not going to say easy, but it's easier to make some of these big changes when you have, I don't know, 100, 500, 1,000 employees. At the scale of a company like Tyson with 140,000 employees, I imagine any little change that you're making is difficult. And because making these changes is difficult, maybe the HR profession within some of these industries don't have like the same skills, or they haven't had the chance to upskill themselves on some of the things that you would think of being more modern in HR. So I'm just curious, like, what's your perspective on that? Um, seeing it firsthand with the Tyson HR team, and I'm sure you have peers at other companies with similar makeups of their organization. Like, where is the HR profession? Where do you think it needs to be, and how far away are we from getting there?
So I do think HR has been a little stuck in the profession, the way we've used to do things. We think about the HR discipline as, here is how you hire, you onboard, you develop, and then you help transition out. And that's not to say that it's not still important, but the way you do it has totally changed. Again, back to, there's technology and data that we need to be, as HR professionals, extremely comfortable with, because that in itself will create new ways of working. And if we can get that into our people strategy, linked to the corporate strategy or company strategy, we can actually make those lives easier. And we can create that culture, and we can create that sense of belonging for the company that's right for us. And what I mean with that is, HR people, I'm not saying we're complacent, but I don't know if we're hungry enough for new skills and new ways of working. And this has nothing to do with generational shifts. I don't believe that is the case. I believe it is the case of having the opportunity to explore and look at options to ways to do things differently, in different ways than we have before. And I would like for every single HR profession, no matter where you are, whether you're starting your career or you're thinking about transitioning into retirement or to boards or whatever, the key word for me is curiosity. And I say that because we've all heard about how quickly the world has moved in the last, say, 3 years. And I admit it can be intimidating and it can be scary in general to try to keep up with all of that. We don't have to master it. But there are a few things that I think we should master. And that is how to figure out where technology, digitalization can be utilized and what it can do for you and for your team members, for your company. If you are constantly met with the resistance that, you can't do that here because we've done this 30 years or whatever, that should, I'm not saying you have to imitate or mirror what I'm doing, but that should get you asking more questions. And it should get you to a point where people feel that there is absolutely nothing that can't be achieved by utilizing technology. You can go up and down the value chain, or you can go up and down the hierarchy in your company and figure out where it has been used, maybe unsuccessfully in the past, maybe now is the time. Or if it was unsuccessful in the past, what were the reasons for it? Was the strategy different? Were the customer base different? Were your products different? What was it? Maybe the skill set was just not there. And that might even lead you down the path as an HR professional to think about, how do we do change management in this company? Because I will bet that if you use the old tools for change management, you probably won't get very far, because that in itself has also changed. So how do we really think about what needs to change and happen within change management to bring the company along? And all of these are areas where an HR person and HR professional can influence. But it starts with you. So I'll give you one example that I think became very real here at Tyson. Our team members at the front line actually got paper checks when I came. And they also had to stand in line to get their pay stub every 2 weeks. So shift change, lunch break, whatever. Thousands of people in different plants stood in line. Here's your pay stub, here's your paper check. That is an employee experience absolute opportunity. So what do? We teach people how to download whatever the system is. In our case, it's Workday, on your phone, and we teach them to do direct deposit. Use your lunch break differently. You don't have to stand in line. All of that doable. It just required everyone to go through a little bit of training. And all of a sudden, it was like, if there would be a way for me to bottle up the facial expressions and the comments and the whole experience when for the first time a team member saw.
And it's such a small thing and it makes such a big difference.
It is, isn't it? That they saw their pay stub on their phone and the money was in the bank account. Just like that, it happened. But it's a small thing, yes, in our world, because back to your comment, maybe tech companies, it's easier. Here, because you're coming from quite far behind, a small thing becomes a really big thing. But you know what? The next one becomes smaller and easier. And that's the momentum that I think we should all try to get on.
And so you mentioned the story about how when the internet was starting up and recruiting on the internet became a thing, it was met with a lot of skepticism. And I feel like we're in a similar moment right now with AI, where a lot of HR leaders there's some, I don't know if it's fear or it like makes them a bit overwhelmed, because they're like, I know this is something that we're going to have to figure out and it's going to have to be a part of our people strategy, but they don't know where to start. They don't know what's snake oil. They don't know what's legit. And so for you, it sounds like this doesn't overwhelm you. It excites you. And maybe like, I don't know, maybe this is like a few years down the road, but I don't know, what are your thoughts on AI? Like, does that get you excited? Because I feel like things are going to change a lot.
It gets me very excited because I think we just scratched the surface, and to figure out where and when and how, I think that's the exciting part. I'm a person who like to sit with my team and throw things on the wall, and maybe something sticks and something doesn't. I know it probably exhausts a lot of people because I just how I work. But there's always something that comes out of those conversations. And one specific is, what can we do? It's almost like I go back to the early days when I had the opportunity to lead HR, the whole function for my previous company. And we sat in a room and we figured out, that was before people analytics became a thing. And we sat in a room, we closed ourselves in 4 hours and figured out what is it that everyone is asking, but no one knows how to ask. And what do we do with that? And how can we build models and what. And it was like, all of a sudden we all had this like, wow, we're all going to rally around people analytics and we're going to build these models and we're going to put it right in the leaders' hands and they're going to see everything. And then someone said, but what about us then? Well, exactly. We're going to change how we can use it to tell stories instead of sit on the material and bring the data. It's almost like the same thing. I think you have to be vulnerable in front of the evolution, I guess, of AI and be okay with not knowing everything. But there is so much available for free. You can go and educate yourself. And what we did here actually at Tyson, when we started to talk about digitalization, AI, pods, we brought in an external expert and we had a whole day training just with the executive team. So everyone was on the same page. No one, you assume that some people are ahead and others behind, but everyone was in that room and learned.
What were some of the things that y'all learned that day?
We talked about what a pod is. We talked about how you can structure your organization to allow for it to become a learning organization. Because in the end, if you're not up for the opportunity to continuously learn and develop, you're not going to get very far in this space. So the culture around becoming a learning organization, we talked about that. We talked about skills, specific skills. We talked about how you bring the whole organization along. We talked about examples of companies that already started the journey and where we felt that we were and what we could do, what we had done. And we took that same training to our board of directors. And then we rolled out that whole training to our whole organization. So step by step, bringing people along. And now we're already on the second iteration of full digitalization and learning enablement for the whole company.
So it sounds like more than just an HR transformation. It sounds more to me like a cultural transformation that you've been overseeing. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, now it is. We're about a year along that specific journey. Mm-hmm. But again, I think we have now, because we have momentum, we have traction, we have more opportunities to talk about things like I mentioned, smart factories and what that means for us and self-driven trucks, and it's fascinating.
Well, and what I love all the examples you're sharing, because there is, I don't know, I'm not an expert in your industry, but I have to imagine there's an element of profitability to the pitch of these ideas. And going back to Daniel's point, one of the key challenges that we keep hearing in our space and our industry is the fact that there aren't enough people leaders that have strong business acumen, and that it's hard to get the credibility that you need to really have other executives listen and buy into the changes that we need to make, the agenda that we need to push forward to modernize human resources. People are failing. And the reason they're failing is that, to that point, many HR leaders just don't have the business acumen. And I know you've had a variety of different experiences. You have finance experience. You thought at one point in your career was going to be marketing. And so how has that, do you think that the experience, the non-HR experience, has shaped you in your approach as a people leader, and how?
Yeah, I think it has. Where I started was that it is healthy to be able to look 360 at everything. Everyone will come to the table for their expertise, but then to be able to talk across areas and bring more questions and answers and conversations to the table, I think just enriches it for everyone. And maybe with a humble mind here, I probably am a little different in my background and my thinking and my education than many of my HR peers because of that. I know when my audience is thinking about whether I'm going to get a capex or not for my big investment to digitalize this company through its people, I have to be able to talk numbers. And that's the mode I'm in when I talk to that group. Every single initiative has a direct return with KPIs, and it's like, let's say, hardcore. There is no fluffiness, no, whatsoever. There is no BS. There is just, this is it. This is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. This is what it costs. This is the return. And by the way, we're going to do it again and again and again until we're there. So you take your audience based on what they need, and you need to be able to adapt accordingly. If you go and stand next on the line with a frontline team member, you talk about very different things. You talk about the ergonomics, you talk about their needs, you talk about their family, you talk about healthcare, well-being, whatever it is, financial well-being, that's what you talk about with that audience. It's in the end, we don't do this just for goodwill. There is a reason for everything. And even though we dig deep here on this podcast and we talk about the specifics, all of it comes back to productivity and the financial returns. And whether it is through increased engagement, there are numbers behind that. Whether it's behind the immigration or citizenship, there's direct financial returns on that. Whether it's free education, everything has a financial return, every single thing. And you can think about it through, we have opportunities. We either get more workers or we get more productivity out of the workers.
Yep.
It's pretty simple, the equation in the end.
I mean, you make it seem so simple and you make it seem so easy, and it's because I believe what it's that you believe, and you know that these practices work, but it takes more than one woman, more than one person. And I'm curious, like, how do you mentioned curiosity earlier, so I'm guessing curiosity is something you look for in your HR leadership team and your HR business partner. So how do you, this is not the norm, as we discussed earlier. And I think that we're early in the movement of applying or treating the employee as a customer, like applying this lens. And so I think there is still a short supply of people, practitioners that truly understand this. And so I'm curious, like, how do you look when you're building your team? What are the things that you're looking for? What are the attributes? What are the skill sets from for all the aspiring, the young future people leaders? What are some of the things that you think are important for those individuals to be looking at or to be investing in at this point of their career?
You know, it's very hard to tell someone to be curious. It's not like today I'm going to go out there, I'm going to be curious. It doesn't work that way. It's like you go out there and today I'm going to be inclusive, or today it doesn't work that way. You have to find other ways to get there. And I think it gets through more basics than that. It gets through being adaptable, being an innovator. Like, what does it mean if you're an innovator? How are you going about your day? That's how you get to being curious, I think. If you think about one of your true missions in life to help develop others and help grow others, you will find ways to bring diversity to the table. If you're not into it, you probably will find more people that look exactly like you because that makes you comfortable. And if you get to a place where you feel perfectly comfortable being uncomfortable, that's when you learn. And you avoid complacency and you remain curious. So you find your own way to get to what it means for you to be curious. I guess that's another way to say what I'm trying to say. Being innovative is also like, okay, you have to be an R&D. No, absolutely not. Yes, I mean, being in R&D, you hopefully have that, but you don't have to be in R&D to be an innovator. You can do that every single day by thinking about how can we do this better? have an inquisitive mind and curious mind and figure out ways to get to doing this repetitive work differently, or use technology or digitalization to make it different, make a different outcome. In the end, I am extremely driven by results. I've been told that several times, and I see the end game very, very early. Like my eyes are on the horizon, and I know there's speed bumps and all of that, but I like fast cars and I drive very fast, unfortunately. So I get there. My problem is to help other people see that we're gonna get there, and I can paint that, but bringing people along is hard. And probably the key to that is, how do you influence? So that's another thing I look for in my team. The ones who can develop self and others, the ones who can influence and be innovator and adaptable. I know that's a lot, but that I do think that's the playbook to get to the curiosity.
I love that. You strike me as someone, we've talked about how you're up for a challenge. In fact, you thrive and almost by being told it can't be done. We can't use online resumes we can't use the web for talent acquisition. You did it, right? We can't modernize the HR work stack because we're different. You delivered on that, right? And so, but we are all mortal, and there are things that even the most courageous of us worry about. And so I'm curious, what are the things that keep you up at night when you think about the job, the vision that you have ahead of you? Maybe it's the external factors or forces that are impacting the people function. I'm just curious, is there one or two things that are really occupying your mind?
I think it's probably the level of stress in the organization, not just ours, but in general in business and in life. And maybe that came to life through COVID more so. And how we all deal with that, I think, is still an unlock. I think we have more stress. We have, yes, engagement, but we have more stress than ever before in the organization. And we've talked about how people opt out from the work life. They don't really have to. They could have phenomenal careers. They're excellent in their fields, but they still opt out because they can. Good for them, but how do we create mechanisms that people wouldn't have to do that? And I'm not saying it necessarily keeps me up at night. I sleep extremely well. I have a gift.
Us too. The minute my head hits the pillow, I'm out.
And maybe that is
Me
the key.
too.
to know how to figure out to wind down and truly get a good night's rest, maybe is the key. But I am a little not worried, but I wonder how we can help more people cope with that.
Yeah,
Mental health is all around us, more so now than before.
I had a prep call the other day with somebody that we're going to talk to in a couple weeks, and she was referencing some research that recently has been done where they measure people that are that self-identify as thriving at work and thriving in their personal life, and then seeing what the overlap is. And I'm gonna mess up the number, but it was like 9%. Like 9% of people say that they feel like they're both thriving in their personal lives and their work lives. And uh the number one thing impacting thriving in your personal life has to do with work. Like work is the biggest driver of that. So it's interesting that's what's not necessarily keeping you up at night and not letting you sleep, but it's something that concerns you. Um, and I wish we could dig into this more, but as Stephen likes to say, we are at that time. We have to round the corner. So now is the portion where we go into our rapid fire questions. So we ask the same 3 or 4 questions to every guest. And yeah, so question one: how do you define a modern people leader? What are the traits and characteristics?
It is someone who can truly inspire self and others to complete, create, design, strategize, and just be a better version of self and others, for self and others.
Love that. If you could go back in time and talk to a 22-year-old you, what career advice would you give yourself and why?
I was very close to becoming an interior designer.
Ooh. The
I
art and the jacket are making sense now.
Yeah, guess so. I'm thinking I made the right choice, but it's something there that makes me wonder, what if I had chosen the other path?
That's my wife's like what if too, interior designer. All right. Is there anything that you believe to be true about the world of work, but don't yet have the data to support?
I think the 4-day work week is coming.
Ooh, I love
I
that.
think so, because go back and think about, when did we get rid of Saturdays? What happened? Why did we stop working Saturdays? I don't think it's too far. I can't prove it, but I don't think it's too far off.
That's a good one.
Well,
That's a good one.
and I've heard, I don't work in the office. I'm remote, and I've worked for companies that have been remote since COVID. But I hear that if you are in the office, that there may be data to support it, just based on how many people are showing up on Fridays, or that are actually in the office on Fridays. But I guess that's neither here nor there. And to Daniel's point, we have two final traditions that we have before we'll wrap up this, what's been an amazing conversation. We were very fortunate to have you on our show, and we were blessed by guests that know other amazing people that are truly doing innovation every single day in the HR space. And so I'm curious, is there anyone that you think really needs to be on the show, that we need to cast a light on the great work that they're doing?
You've had phenomenal people on the show. I've looked through the roster. There were a few that I would have recommended, definitely. There are two names that came to mind, and they're a little different, but I'd like to share the names and then the reasons, because I think they're so different in their approaches that it's good for all of us to hear their stories. One is a very unorthodox, I guess, for this podcast, but his name is Keith Sunderling. And the reason I share his name, he's a commissioner for the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. And yeah, you're like, oh, wait a minute, that's a government employee. Yeah, I get it. But I would like you to prove me wrong, that he would probably be one of the most inspiring government employees that you will ever have heard of. He is absolutely phenomenal at explaining the why and the what and the how, without the political jargon that goes sometimes with that. I think people should hear from him about, it doesn't matter whether it's pay equity or whatever it might be. Like, he is so down to earth. It was Josh Burson who introduced me to him, and I think he's fabulous. So anyway, the other one is a phenomenal woman named Frances Fry, if you've heard of her. She is today a professor at Harvard, but she used to work as a head of leadership and strategy for Uber. And her big thing is trust, and why every single thing around leadership and development starts with trust. And this is, you can say that and it means nothing. The way she explains it, it all falls in place. I think you'd enjoy her.
Oh my, we would be honored to have either or both on our show, and we'll definitely reach out to them. So thank you for nominating them. And that gets us to our final tradition on the show, and it's taking a moment to reflect on this. It's truly been an amazing conversation. I have enjoyed every word that we have uttered together. And so we all choose a single word or a few words just to reflect and close the discussion in a way that in a powerful way, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. And so we like for our guests to go first, but I'm ready if you need some time to think about it.
One word.
or a few. It can be a phrase.
How about disruptive creativity?
Ooh, yes. I'm going to go with, I don't know exactly. I'm going to probably say it wrong, but I'm going to go with Sisu or Sisu. I don't know. I think I'm butchering the Finnish word, but
Oh, you're good.
I
Sisu.
love that. Sisu.
Sisu.
Good job, Stephen. I'm gonna go with drip. So this is a word that I learned recently from my Gen Z brother. So when somebody has like swag and style, they have drip. And with the jacket, the artwork, the
Oh,
dreams of
I could.
being an interior designer, you definitely have drip. So that's my one word
Yes.
close.
And what a perfect way to wrap things up, Daniel. You
Thank
truly
you.
have our guest at a loss for words. And for those that are listening, go watch the YouTube. We do show video on YouTube, and everything will become crystal clear. And he is not joking. Some serious trips. So,
Thank you.
well, thank you so much for joining us today. It has been a blast. Shout out to Helen for nominating you. We have really enjoyed it, and hopefully you're open to maybe coming back in the future.
Maybe a group episode.
Would
with
love
Helen.
it. Thank
Yeah.
you so much for
Awesome.
having me.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Modern People Leader. We really, really appreciate it. And if you enjoyed the show, please leave us a 5-star rating. It would mean the world to us. And connect with us on LinkedIn. We wanna know what you think about the show. And yeah, you can find links to both of our profiles in the show notes. So thanks again for listening, and see you on the next episode.